Hey everyone, before we start, let me ask you, do you think a building can lie? Like its appearance say one thing, but its interior say something else? Or it uses materials covered to look more expensive than they really are? Or it overdoes decoration to hide a weakness or a function void? The answer is of course no, definitely not. Today we are going to talking about an important concept in architecture. It's called honest architecture. But what does it mean for a building to be honest? And can buildings like Bauhaus or the Jewish Museum in Berlin or even Deconstructivism buildings that look strange but in their own way might be honest actually express honest architecture? That's what we'll find out today in a new episode of Zakaret El-Omara. I am Muhammad Yab and let's dive into the memory of honest architecture. In fact, the concept of honest architecture as a philosophical term was not used in the early of Islamic era in this existing wording, as it's a relatively modern term that emerged in the 19th century within the Western context. However, the sense of the idea honesty in the use of material, expression of function, and avoidance of false ornamentation was clearly present in Islamic architecture from its earliest beginnings. The concept of honest architecture emerged gradually in the late 19th century with the rise of artistic and architectural movement that objective to exclusive ornamentation and fairness in architecture, leading the way were the art and craft movement led by John Ruskin and William Morris, who called for the idea that a building should express its material and function without acting or embellishment. But the concept started to become clearly named in the 19th century with the emergence of modernism, especially with pioneers like Le Corbusier and Mies van der Rohe, who championed slogans like form follow function and less is more. They saw honesty in architecture as a showing the structure, materials, and function without false decoration. With the development of architecture in the postmodern era, the concept began to expand and a discussion emerged about whether honesty has to be literal and material or can it be symbolic and emotional. This was reflected in the architectural works like the Jewish Museum in Berlin or the Sagrada Familia Church, which despite their imagination and abstraction still conveyed deep, honest feeling and ideas. So honest architecture isn't just a style, it's philosophy that's asked, does the building tell the truth? And that's through firstly honest in materials. If the building is made of concrete, let it appear as a concrete, don't cover it with a layer of stone or wood. Honest architecture respects each material and show it in its natural state without deception. Also honesty in structure. The structure system should to be visible. That means columns, beams, ceiling, they should all be clear and part of the design, not hidden behind the decoration. Also honesty in function. That means the shape and design of the building should express the purpose it was built for. No elements that are just for looks with no function or that trick the viewer about the building's reality. And also simplicity and clarity. The simpler and more direct the design, the more powerful and effective it becomes. Honest architecture avoids meaningless complexity and focuses on what truly matters. Also responding to the context. The building deals honestly with the environment around it, from climate, nature, culture and traditions. It respects the land it stands on and tries to integrate with it, not impose itself on it. Simply put, honest architecture is the beauty of truth, a beauty that comes from clarity, from the sincere expression of idea and function, from respecting materials, people, and place. But are there examples of honest architecture? Of course, there are many examples around the world that embody these principles, such as the Bauhaus. Bauhaus, most of the prominent examples of honest architecture in modern times. In fact, many of the principles that define honest architecture today were started, published, and promoted strongly by the Bauhaus and the start of 20th century. For example, form follow function. This is the cornerstone of Bauhaus thinking. It means the form of a building or any design element must come directly from its function, not from ornamentation or tradition that don't serve a practical purpose. This is the essence of honesty. The building doesn't pretend to be place or temple. It clearly expresses the purpose it was designed for, whether factory, school, or residence. Number 2. Honest use of materials. The Bauhaus rejected hidden construction materials behind plaster and decoration. If the building is made of concrete, iron, and glass, these materials are left exposed to speak for themselves. The concrete will look like concrete. The metal frame is not hidden. This is considered honestly towards the nature of the materials, instead of faking them to look like something else, like using concrete to imitate carved stone. Number 3. Avoid unnecessary ornament. Bauhaus saw the historical decoration popular before it's a kind of architecture lie. They were added to give building a historic or artistic value it didn't really have. The beauty of Bauhaus architecture comes from the purity of lines, proportions between volumes, glass transparency, and the quality of materials themselves. It's beauty born from the truth and simplicity. Number 4. Transparency and clarity. The Bauhaus made heavy use of large glass curtain walls, like in the Bauhaus building in Dessau, Germany, designed by Walter Gropius. This wasn't just a stylistic choice, it was an expression of transparency, showing the building's inner structure and the lives of people inside. That represents both structures and social honesty, removing the boundary between inside and outside. The workshop wing features a huge glass facade that honestly reveals the space function as a place for work and creativity, allowing maximum light to enter. The concrete frame is exposed and clear. No decoration exists, and the whole design is based on simple geometric shapes that serve the function of each part. The Bauhaus school was extremely honest in two things. Number 1, it used material as they are, like showing steel without fake paints or decoration. Number 2, it is designed directly serve its function, as form follow use, not the other way around. Bauhaus is an embodiment of honesty because it rejects deceptions and ornament and celebrated truth of functions, materials, and structure systems. The second example of honest architecture is La Sagrada Familia Church in Spain, in Barcelona. La Sagrada Familia by Antoni Gaudí represents a unique case of honest architecture, distinctly different from modern functionalist styles like Bauhaus or even Deconstructivism. While Bauhaus emphasizes clear expression of function, materials, and structure in a simple, straightforward manner, La Sagrada Familia reflects a different kind of honesty, grounded in artistic, spiritual, and symbolic depth. Gaudí designed the church using organic forms inspired by nature, such as tree-like columns that are not merely decorative but play an active structural role. These columns symbolize life and nature, reflecting Gaudí's belief that architecture should be part of natural order, not isolated from it. They represent growth, strength, and continuity, turning the church into a sacred forest that immerses the visitor in a living spiritual world. Although the church is full of details and complex ornamentations that might be considered excessive by some architectural schools, every element carries deep symbolic and religious meaning. The carving and interactive decoration symbolize key Christian narratives: creation, life, death, and resurrection. Every detail from sculpture to carving serve a symbolic function. For instance, the plants, animals, and angels represent faith, hope, and salvation. These details create a kind of visual language that conveys a deep spiritual message, turning the church into not just a place of worship, but a complete spiritual experience, engaging both the sense and interact. This honesty is not purely technical, but artistic and spiritual. It reflects Gaudí's faith and his desire to communicate complex spiritual ideas through space, materials, form, and symbolism. Thus, La Sagrada Familia is not honesty merely in a function or technical sense. It's artistically representing a deeply human and spiritual experience. It's broadening the concept of honesty in architecture to include spiritual and artistic sincerity, not just structure and function clarity, making it one of the clearest examples of deeply expressive and honest architecture. The third example of honest architecture, the Jewish Museum in Berlin. As we discussed, my friend, honest architecture is about revealing materials and structure without concealment or deceit. It expresses the function clearly, avoids visual manipulation, respects its concepts and surroundings, and conveys emotion or idea sincerely through its architectural elements. When we look at the Jewish Museum in Berlin, we find an outstanding example of this philosophy. The museum is not just a functional building. It's a space that tells history filled with pain and suffering. Daniel Libeskind, the architect of the museum, employed Brooke's voice and winding corridors, noise as void spaces, to represent the idea of diaspora and disconnecting. The walls are irregular, the windows are not comfortably aligned, and there are spaces filled with heavy silence, such as the Holocaust Tower, which reflects isolation and despair. This dark, secluded space evokes a direct emotional response, making the museum deeply honest in expressing the feeling it's aimed to convey. This is a form of contemporary architecture honesty. Additionally, the building used real, exposed materials like zinc cladding, concrete, and raw metals without decorative covering. Every element serves as a psychological or sensory function, reinforcing the material and structural honesty of the building. But here an important point. The museum is a clear example of Deconstructivism architecture, a style known for breaking traditional forms and creating irregular geometry to symbolize emotional or existential complexity. That doesn't mean it contradicts the idea of honest architecture. On the contrary, the museum uses deconstruction as a sincere tool to express pain, fragmentation, and absence. It does so through space, materiality, and symbolic computation, such as the line of void. In this context, Deconstructivism architecture does not oppose architectural honesty. Instead, it becomes a profound method for communicating human message and cultural trauma in a sincere and sensory manner. In the end, the Jewish Museum of Berlin is a form of honest architecture, not in the literature of Bauhaus scene, but in a symbolic, emotional, and aesthetic way that delivers its message without any disguise. Also, we have a Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao. The Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, designed by Frank Gehry, is a strong example of Deconstructivism architecture which breaks conventional rules of form, function, and materiality. Gehry used advanced technology and complex software to create curving, free, and irregular shapes that express motion and apparent chaos, as if the building itself is speaking a new language different from strict traditional form. In Deconstructivism architecture, the goal is not just to show function or material transparently, but to create a sensory and intellectual experience. The Guggenheim is not just a gallery, it's an artwork itself. Its complex yet harmonious form reflects the idea of breaking down and reassembling, challenging old architecture rules and expressing the complexity of modern life. The honesty here is not in clarity or simplicity, but in authentic expression, the spirit of the age and innovation. The building uses titanium as an artistic outer shell that gleams and shifts with the light, reflecting change and evolution. Together, the materials and forms send a message about the future, technology, and contemporary art. While the museum may not be honest in the traditional architecture sense of structure or functional transparency, it is deeply honest from a deconstructivism perspective, expressing with integrity the spirit of modern complexity. Its honesty lies to its artistic vision and using new materials and techniques to create a rich sensory and architecture experience. Final example of honest architecture is Shenzhen Concert Hall. The Shenzhen Concert Hall is designed by Arata Itozaki in 2007. Is one of the most mature examples of contemporary honest architecture. The building operates on the principle of what you see is what you get. The glass reveals the structures, and the wood in the symphony hall isn't decorative. It is there to optimize natural acoustics. This philosophy mirrors the Bauhaus spirit of form follow function, and material is speaking truthfully without disguise. Unlike La Sagrada Familia, which uses symbolic trees and religious ornamentation to convey spiritual honesty, the Shenzhen Concert Hall says, "I will not decorate you, I will let you hear the purest sound possible." Compared to the Jewish Museum in Berlin, which expresses pain and absence through metaphor like broken voids and irregular walls, or the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, which does it through curves and dynamic forms, like honest in its artistic intent, but potentially showy. Shenzhen Concert Hall, building everything on one foundation: sound, sustainability, and simplicity without exaggeration or theatricality. It shows that honest architecture doesn't mean bore or dull. It can be rich in intention, clarity of material, and sincerity in function and message. Honest architecture isn't just about walls and material. It's a position, a philosophy. It says that beauty doesn't need a mask, and that emotion can be built with break, light, and space in a time when a form dominates and spectacle in the goal. Honest architecture brings us back to the essential question: is the building telling the truth? Is it honest with itself, with people, with the environment? In this episode, we explored a range from the aesthetic simplicity of Bauhaus to the symbolic pain of the Jewish Museum in Berlin, the living fantasy of La Sagrada Familia, and the wonder of Guggenheim in Bilbao, each in their own way. Try to be honest architecture. And finally, my friend, I wanna say, honest architecture isn't style, it's an invitation to design with sincerity in a world speeding up and faking in everything. It's a message that says, build the way you want to live, not the way you want to be photographed. And before you go, I have a question for you. Do you think that honesty in architecture has become a luxury, or it is the key that can bring architecture back to its true meaning? I will be following all your answers in the comments. And don't forget, if you like the episode and want to know more about Zakaret El-Omara, share and like if you are in YouTube, and follow if you are on Instagram. Bye bye.